Hey everybody, how you doing this morning? Welcome to another You Be the Behavior Consultant. Woo, right in my ear there. That was loud. We have another very interesting topic for you today. We are going to be talking about private events, thinking, feelings, all that fun stuff. And so we're going to get into it. I don't like delaying. I like getting right into it right away so that we stay on schedule and that, oh gosh, my speaker is so loud here. So I'm going to turn this down so it doesn't interfere. There we go. So what is it? What are we doing today? This is You Be the Behavior Consultant, the live stream I do every Monday at 11 a.m. I think this is something like episode 68 or something like that. We've just been pretty consistent here. We only had one little glitch where I transferred over to YouTube, and so we've made the big switch. Hey Brian, thanks for joining us today. Oh, and Sheila is very excited about this topic because she just had a discussion about anthropomorphism. So good, a great topic for you this week. Absolutely. So what do? We talk about a topic, like we said, we're going to talk about thinking and feeling. And I've got some questions that I'm going to throw out there for you. We've got some really cool video to explore this time. And of course, some interesting definitions that you may not have been exposed to before. I've been doing a lot of reading this week and some great journal articles for those of you that are members of Animal Training Fundamentals that you're definitely going to want to dive into if you're looking for more reading material on the topics. And then we're going to recap it all. Alex is here. Oh, good. A favorite topic for you as well. Fabulous. All right, well, let's get into it. So we're going to talk about thoughts and emotions, feeling, thinking, all that great stuff. And we've got Kirsten here. Yes. All right. You know, it's such a deep topic. Again, I keep picking these tough ones that, you know, it's hard to really get into everything in just an hour. So we're kind of scratching the surface, to be honest. But it's all right. It's a good place to start, right? So let's I've got a few questions here to get us started. And the first one's really heavy. But I love this question, and I wonder if anybody's even thought about it before. What do you think thinking is? That's a first one to think about. And then another one to think about is, do thoughts and emotions cause behavior? That one might be a little bit easier to answer. And even the third one might be easier to answer. And how do we evaluate thinking and feeling when it comes to animal training, what we do as animal trainers? So those are not light questions. But it'll get the ball rolling, and we'll look at some video clips to help us evaluate some of these things. And of course, I do have some more questions as well. And one of the things I can do is I can even go to my slide that has a little bit more prompting to get us going. It has those 3 questions on there as well. That what is thinking? Do thoughts and emotions cause behavior? And how do we evaluate thinking and feeling? And is there value in considering thoughts and emotions? This might tie into Sheila's question about anthropomorphism. And then we'll also get into the genetics aspect and if this impacts emotional responses and other private events. So how brave are you all feeling? You know that I'm not judgmental. This is all just about discussing these topics. We're not looking for, quote, right or wrong answers. We're just trying to get some things going here, and that'll lead us into some video clips where we can explore these topics a little bit more. And I know these are ones that it might be harder to Google because you may not find a specific answer out there on some of those things. A little different than when I ask for specific definitions, although we'll go over some definitions of some things that help us with these topics this week. I don't know, what do you guys think? What are your thoughts on this? And you can even think about thinking while you're thinking. Whoa. How's that for some intense stuff to go on there? I know it's deep, super deep. And it's very convoluted when you start thinking about your own behavior and the animal's behavior, when you start thinking about thinking. I know this stuff is very circular sometimes. Any thoughts? Well, and maybe I can even give you a video. The brain's way of reasoning or working out problems. Animal thinking I interpret as a cause and a consequence. Ooh, interesting. Okay. Let's see. I struggle with emotions as we try to remove the aspect and focus on the actions we see, but the idea of their emotions is what drives me to this topic in the first place. Okay. And I've seen animal behavior related to loss, death of another animal. Okay. So wondering, is there an emotional experience going on there? Like when you've seen the videos of like elephants sniffing at the bones of another elephant. We've seen videos of that and wondering what's going on there. What might that elephant be experiencing? And we might put our own experience onto that and think, okay, maybe they're mourning the death of that elephant. We don't know, right? That's because we would consider that a private event. But we can see the behavior that the elephant is doing and maybe make some conclusions based on what we're seeing there. Ah, yes. And that stuff about consequence is really important there. I think those are important things to notice, and those observations that you see are important. And as Megan was saying, struggling with the emotions part is challenging for us, right? And then we have our own experience that we're trying to understand when we look at this and we're looking at animals. Yeah. And I like, let's see, emotions are very hard to understand if you don't know the species, natural behaviors such as a human smile and other primates. Oh, I'm really glad you mentioned the other species. Yeah, that's very important too. I think that's one of the things when, especially for me, working, studying right now, a lot of the material, obviously in behavior science, they looked at animals as well as human behavior for information. But I think, they looked at rats and pigeons, whereas all of us here, we may be working with many, 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 many different species. And so we have to know the natural history of a lot of different species. And that's really important. And I think there is one thing, and this ties into the thinking thing, that is really interesting when it comes to humans, that is interesting when we compare to animals, that we don't necessarily have all the answers. I'll put it that way. But I'm going to let's look at a video that I think might be really fun to look at and have us think about this idea about thinking. So I'll give you a little background on the video. So this was a raven that Hilary Hankey from Avian Behavior International, she was training for a bird show that she and I were working on to set up with a particular zoo. And she had trained the raven to pick up objects and put the objects on a white circle. And so the raven had a lot of reinforcement history for doing this behavior. And in this video clip, she gives the bird an object to put on that circle. And I want you to watch and see what happens. So let me show you this video.
Pick things up differently. Well, that one blew off. Okay. And I imagine, well, these are kind of heavy, so that'll be interesting. Don't hurt yourself.
Very heavy.
It's really heavy. Gotta figure it out. I know he's done those before, so otherwise it might be. Move it closer. That's
That is the best thing I've ever seen in my life.
Good boy.
I love that.
That is incredible.
I'm smart. I'm smart.
Can I get a tape of that? Can we please?
Oh my god.
That was the best thing ever.
Pick things up.
So what do you think about that? We keep saying think here. So that raven, I don't know if you could see what happened there. What an awesome video. Amazing is what everyone's saying. Yeah, so instead of bringing the object to the white dot because it was too heavy, the raven brought the white dot to the object, and so it didn't have very far to bring the heavy object, and just kind of slid the white dot under the object to get the reinforcer. So what does that tell us? What does that tell us? What do you think about that and thinking? So does it help us anymore with our thinking definition, or what might thinking be? Sorry, my dog has to bark a little. So Michelle says, creative problem solving, the correct picture for reinforcement. Ooh, I like that. And I apologize for my dog here. He understands a bit of the rules of the game. and Annetta says, cool video. The raven saw the task as just getting the two objects together and not bringing one thing to another. Sorry. I'm coughing and my dog is barking. And Karen says problem solving. Yeah, so problem solving. This tells me that the raven is smarter than I am. All right. So I've got a little definition for you here. I apologize for my dog. So what is thinking? It's a covert behavior. So it's something that's happening within that and Skinner described it as within the skin. So it's something that we can't see. And I think the really important thing, so sorry about the dog, guys. So I think the way that covert, sorry. So the way that Skinner described it is within the skin, that basically we can't see it. And one of the things about covert is that we need to understand is that it doesn't mean that it's hidden in the sense that like it's behind a wall, like, you know, like your animal could be in another room, like Luther was just barking in the other room. I could hear it, but I couldn't see it. But within the skin, meaning that, you know, we can't see it hidden that way. But it's also an operant behavior in that it's controlled by its consequences. And I think that's the thing that's really important to understand, in the sense that what we saw there with that raven is that it was controlled by consequences, right? Even though he may have never done that specific behavior before, problem solving is controlled by consequences, right? So in his head, he had a sort of, if I do this, then this will happen, based on previous reinforcement history, with the fact that putting, as Annetta pointed out, if I put these two objects together, I think good things happen. So he's got that reinforcement history, and so he made, you know, the little thought process in his head. If I do this, then this will happen, right? Now we don't know exactly what that looks like inside his brain, but I think what's really cool when you think about human thinking, and I was reading this in one of the journal articles that I read, that Skinner thought that the way human thinking looks like is that it's basically humans talking to themselves. And he thought that the way like kids learn how to talk is that they babble, right? And then adults start reinforcing specific words. And so that turns into verbal behavior, right? Words being said out loud. But then humans are reinforced for being quiet, right? After a while, we start telling people, kids, that they can't talk all the time out loud, right? That they should start keeping their thoughts, their words to themselves. And so they start learning to talk quieter, or you're not supposed to read out loud. You're supposed to read to yourself. And so we start learning to say all those things to ourselves inside of our head. And so when you think about when you are thinking, do we think in pictures? Maybe we do when we dream. Like when we dream, it's like a movie. But when we think, it's a stream of words, right? So that really thinking is just talking to ourselves. And so a lot of times when we're thinking, we think about, if I do this, then this will happen. And I think the really nice example they talk about is with chess players, and that before a chess player makes a move, he thinks about, well, if I do this, then this will happen. And really good chess players can think about the whole game. If I do this, then my opponent might do this, and then I will do this, and so they think through the whole process, right? There you go. And so I'm just reading some of your comments. And so I think about this, even as us as animal trainers, if you, know your individual animal really well, or even if you have a lot of experience training, you may think, well, I'm going to do this, and then my animal might do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then my animal might do this. And so even as we are training, even though there's no, necessarily words going on between you and the animal, there's you thinking something, and then there's the animal thinking something, and reinforcement occurring externally, and so on and so forth. Isn't that fascinating? And Etta says maybe it's different from person to person. Some think in pictures and others don't. I think that could absolutely be true, because we don't know exactly what's happening in a person's private events. And maybe some people are not verbal. And so how do they think? We don't know. And then when we think about our animal, how does an animal think? What does it look like when an animal is thinking? Are they thinking in pictures? Do they think in their own languages? We don't know. So, Saria says some chess players use the brain area for face recognitions or plays recognitions. Yeah, maybe they see it as a picture as opposed to words. Rebecca says, my mom was a teacher, and I think she mentioned something like this with her students. Some have an easier time creating a movie for words, and others don't as much, right? So this is the thing with private events, because it is covert behavior within the skin, we don't know. And the whole thing with the thinking as a person talking to themselves, that was Skinner's interpretation. Oh, sorry, this is Jordan using Rebecca. Sorry, I'm sorry, Jordan. I called you Rebecca. Got it. Yeah. So I'm just repeating Skinner's words. So this may have evolved since the time that he wrote those words. So really interesting, right? To think about what is thinking, the fact that it really is sort of practicing something in your head, however that may be, whether it's pictures or words. And we don't know exactly what it is with animals, right? Because what is it? We don't know what that looks like. Jordan didn't want to assume Rebecca's identity. Okay. Right. So we don't really know exactly what that experience is, what that private event is in the animal's head. But I think the really cool thing to think about is that it is a behavior, and that it is a behavior that is still being controlled by consequences. And Megan says, it makes me think about people being different learners, some verbal, some visual, some by doing. I wonder if it's similar with animals. Yeah, and we just don't know, because we don't really have a way to access what that private event looks like. But even so, it may not matter, right? But I think that the key thing to identify is that it's still a behavior. It's just a behavior, right? And it's a behavior that's controlled by consequences and antecedents. So I think that's something that we really want to keep in mind. So now with that in mind, let's so let's look at another animal. And I want you to look at this orangutan and see if you can, what gives you information about, quote, thinking. You know, see how you might ascertain if she is thinking. And I'll tell you about this individual. She was, and this is, you know, we've got some people here that work with great apes. This was a orangutan that had issues with the door being shut. And so we worked on some strategies to address that. And so you're going to kind of see a before and during and after of working with her to teach her to be comfortable with the door being shut. So this is just working sort of in an enclosed area. Obviously she has a huge habitat outside where she gets to have a great time, but there are areas inside where we need to teach animals to be comfortable, whether we have to do medical procedure, training for cooperation, medical care, things like that. And so you're going to see sort of the before and after. And so I want you to see if you can, quote, see her thinking and maybe identify the things that give you information about that.
Door.
Over your hands. 1, 2, 3. No, you can do 5.
Bonjour. Door. You get kind of trying to food in there.
Suzanne, just up there. Tell him that he can start. If he gives it, hang on, he can throw in the girls.
Bonjour. Come on. Good girl, bonjour.
One more go?
Good girl. Come on, bonjour.
Ready?
Come on.
Yeah.
No.
What's your ball? Bonjour. Bonjour. Door.
Good.
Okay, bonjour, come. Door. And door. Good girl, bonjour. Show me hand. Hand. Good girl. Show me this hand. Foot. This foot. Good girl. Good girl. Good girl. Show me your back. Good girl, monsieur. Monsieur, door. Good girl, monsieur. Door.
Over your hands. 1, 2, 3. No, you can do 5.
Monsieur. Door. You get kind of trying to food in there.
Suzanne.
So I'll turn down the volume and let you guys comment if you want to. So what were some of the things you might have noticed that gave you some information? And we may also slide into a little bit of emotional stuff too. What kind of things give you information? I mean, you as an animal trainer, what would you look at? But the audio should be down on that, right? So it's not. I think so. Yeah, that's down. No thoughts? Yeah, so Al says eyes and body movement. Yeah, so for me, I think a big Okay, and Jordan says, I noticed she's looking back at the door in the before and in progress parts, but she seems less interested in doing so in the success video. She looks, and Annetta says she looks at the door in the last part of the video. She doesn't move. She's reacting slower on the door movement after a number of times. Christina says, I would look at what the animal reacts to watching the door. The shifty eye movement would tell me if she's uncomfortable with the door closing. Yeah, so you guys are noticing a lot of things. So I think the fact that, you know, eyes to me in a lot of the species we work with give us a lot of information. What does the animal orient to? What does the animal look at? And the fact that she sits in the doorway at one point, you know, says to me, at least with a lot of great apes, that, you know, I would interpret that as, I don't want this door to close. That the animal is thinking about, I would prefer this door does not close. So we, even though we don't have access to what she, you know, that private event in her head, what we have to look at is what we would call, you know, overt. Ooh, sorry, my computer just did something. We have overt body language, right? We have overt observable body language that we can look at that gives us information. The reinforcement became greater to stay with the trainer at the gate, then move outside. Yeah, so that, you know, when we see behavior that we do like, right, we can reinforce that. Yeah, of course. So we make our decisions based on some of those things. So that's important information to us. So basically, so let's go to some definitions here. So let's look at what is covert. So covert is that behavior which cannot be directly observed and measured. So that's that thinking, feeling, dreaming. We can't directly access it, and these are called private events. And one of the things I skipped over, but we'll go back to, is what is a radical behaviorist. So radical behaviorists view covert behavior as governed by the same rules as overt behavior. So that's what we talked about earlier, that thinking is still governed by consequences. And covert behavior, those private events, can be observed and measured, for example. So we can see that a tiger may flatten its ears and snarl and show its teeth, and we can describe that as aggressive behavior, and we can correlate that to, oh, okay, this animal may be feeling, you know, that private event of aggression. And we can't necessarily access what it's feeling, but we can sort of measure that level of that feeling, so to speak, by those overt behaviors of what we observe with its body language. So even though the covert behavior is not directly attainable, the overt behavior can provide some information for us to consider. So that's all that stuff that we can directly observe and measure. So this can include the physical movements, the changes in body language, the muscle tension, the eye shape. If we see, you know, the hair stand up on the back of the neck, and the verbal behavior even. So like vocalizations, you know, snarling, all that stuff. So we can infer the covert from the overt. Yes. So that is very important information for us. So that's what we pay attention to. So going back to what is radical behaviorism means that we need to go back to two other definitions that I didn't cover just yet. So first of all, we want to talk about what is mentalism, because we didn't really get into this yet. So this is the idea that something within us is the cause of behavior. So this is the idea that I feel sad and therefore I cry, or I feel scared, therefore I run away, or the tiger is aggressive, therefore he growls and he bites and he lunges at us. And this is, I would say, what most of the world thinks of, and this is why those of us that come from this approach that's more of from a behaviorist approach have a lot of trouble in the world. Sounds like a therapy session. Yeah, you're right. And this is, and so this is a challenge for most of us in the world. When you walk around the world and people are telling you to examine your feelings, or you need more willpower, and then you're going to succeed, or just, you know, buck up, buddy. this is the problem, right? And when they talk about, a cognitive approach, this is all coming from this kind of approach. And this is opposite to what we're talking about today, to be honest. What we're talking about really is coming from a radical behaviorist approach. This is a philosophy of science that supports that behavior is selected. We do things because of biology, one, so our genetics, right? So we're already predisposed to feel sad when bad things happen, or feel scared when, somebody comes running after us, or feel like we need to fight back when we get attacked. Right? So we're predisposed to that. There's genetics for that, right? But we're also selected by consequences to do more of that, right? So if it works to show aggressive behavior, if you fought back and that thing went away, then you're going to do that more often. If you got sad and maybe it got you lots of hugs and attention that made you feel good, then maybe you're going to get sad more when certain things happen, right? So that's there. And also our culture supports that. So let's say you get on Facebook and you rant and rave about something and everybody goes, yeah, you go, girl. Then ranting and raving on Facebook may be exactly what I do more often because it got me all the attention that I wanted, right? Or the culture supports that. So those three processes select our behavior, and so it's not about coming from within; it's the environment selecting for these things. So with the biology, it's a genetic selection, right? It's the phylogeny that over generations selects for the ability to show emotions, or specific behavioral patterns, like the border collie that is super zoned in and focused on hurting animals, and and it's like staring down that ball or staring down those sheep. So that modal action pattern has been selected for, but it can also be modified by reinforcement. That's why they will chase a ball like 100 million times versus the my pit bull who would rather lay on the couch all day. So it means there's genetics and heritability that will influence behavior over generations. It means experience will influence behavior over a lifetime. And in the case of humans, social experience will influence behavior, or social acceptability will influence the behavior of groups of people over history. So radical behaviorism focuses on observable events and considers private events such as thinking and feeling under the same behavioral control as overt behavior. So we don't view emotions as what causes your behavior. We view the environment as what is influencing your behavior, and they're under the same control as overt behavior. So it says that this inclusion of private events is why it differs from other forms of behaviorism and is why it's considered radical. What? It's so radical. All right. So I thought I'd show you another video of a hornbill doing behavior. This one doesn't have sound, so I'm just going to go ahead and let you watch it, and I'll talk over it. And again, this is where we can kind of look at that body language, and especially when he starts doing some retrieve stuff. And I love hornbills for this because, and even here too, you can kind of see that stuff that we're talking about where you see the thinking, in my opinion, by looking at the overt behavior. See if you see it. So again, what are the things that you observe that make you go, oh, I think this guy is figuring out what he needs to do in order to get desired consequences? Do you guys see those things going on there? And would you think, when you think about your own training, can you relate to those experiences going on for yourself and what you might be observing when you're training? You know, what do you, it's kind of like a dance between you and your animal, right? The paws and the eyes, yeah. The fact that he's pausing, yeah, let's see. Leads with the beak down into the bucket after dropping the item to almost test if that was the right move. Yeah. And I like that because that's exactly like what they describe with the chess player. It's like the chess player is saying in his head, if I do this, it's like the chess player is testing in his head when he's thinking, should I do this first before he actually does it in real life? Like in his head, he's testing the move before he does it in real life. And it's almost like you can see that with the hornbill. Like he's thinking, should I do this? And then he does it and it works. And Annetta says she just saw it with the camel today. Then almost instantly dropping the ring in the later clip. Yeah, because it worked. It got the consequence that he wanted. So I know we don't really know because we can't you know, see the animal's private event, but we can see the covert or overt behavior. And maybe that is what's going on inside of his head there. Maybe that's what he's thinking. They are fast to reward the tests. He tests less as the clip goes on. He isn't just dropping, but looking well for the bucket and the trainer. Yes, I think that's a really important point. He's just not flinging it and hoping it goes in the bucket. He is very, very deliberate when he puts it in there. I think that's a good observation. When we see that, I think a lot of times animal trainers go, he understands what he's supposed to do to get the reinforcement. He looks for the reinforcement as soon as he drops the bracelet, as he figures it out. Yeah. So I think you're right on that. He's like, I've had enough reinforcement history now that I have figured out that if I do this, this will happen. So again, that's this, again, that connection to reinforcement, that we really start to see when we start thinking about thinking as a behavior that has consequences. And again, it's tied to overt behavior and reinforcement. And again, again, even though we can't access these private events, if we start thinking about them that way and thinking about them connected to overt behavior, it can help us understand that they're occurring. Yeah, so it's pretty cool when you think about it that way, and that it's going on for us too at the same time. And so it's this constant back and forth. Again, I like to think of it as that chess game, and that we're basically playing chess with the animal the whole time. He also responds to the actions of the trainer. He is reading the trainer. Yeah, that's how I think of it. It's like just this big, fancy, elaborate chess game. And again, it ties in with you understanding your individual and you also understanding the natural history of your species. So knowing the phylogeny, the genetics, you know, what are they capable of doing? What are they physically capable of doing? Which I think is really cool. So let's talk a little bit about this emotional responses. So we're definitely looking at the thinking here. And now let's take this into the emotional responses here. So I've got another video we'll look at with a cassowary. And let's see, and it says, funny to see how he's not 100% sure the first time. So he's not 100% sure about letting go of the object. He let go when the trainer reached for the treat. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. All right, so let's look at this cassowary. and it's funny to listen to what I'm saying as we watch this cassowary. Didn't like that. We definitely have to be fast with our reinforcers, right?
Kita mesti berikan reinforcementnya dengan cepat ya, penguatannya dengan cepat.
And right to his mouth so he doesn't get mad.
Ya, dan langsung ke mulutnya supaya dia tidak menjadi
Because he's getting pissed. All right.
drop a bunch of that too. He gets very mad if he doesn't get the food. Figure that. There, right there. All right, missed it. I'm liking his body language better.
Yeah.
Didn't like that. We definitely have to be fast with our reinforcers, right?
Kita mesti berikan reinforcementnya dengan cepat ya, penguatan dengan cepat.
They actually had other ones that were really, really nice that you could go in with. This one, not so much. And it's really interesting because I'm trying to figure out all the different things that I'm doing that are creating the aggressive responses and trying to figure out, you know, what is less likely to piss him off. So again, you know, I'm inferring that his private events, his private, you know, inside that there is an emotional state that is pissed off, right? As I said, but I'm getting all that based on overt behavior, right? You know, the kicking and the way that, well, and again, I could let you guys identify all the different things that he is doing that is giving me information about what I'm, you know, how I'm, you know, coming to the conclusion that he's not very happy with me.
We definitely have to be fast with our
and in general, I mean, they brought me over there because they wanted to say, hey, how do we deal with this guy's aggressive behavior?
And right to his mouth.
So, but there's a number of things that it's giving me information, not just the kicking, by the way. So, and you may want to look to that. But again, this comes back to, again, as animal trainers, what we learn as we spend time around animals, right? And there's a number of things that I'm looking at, and there's a number of things that I'm evaluating, again, that have to do with antecedents and consequences. Throat fluttering. I don't know that I was looking at that so much, but like right there was a bunch of stuff that that was changing what I was doing. All right. We are in Indonesia, yeah. So rising of the body, neck a little higher, ignoring food, all of those for sure were giving me information. So the fact that he stood up really tall, pulled his head back, wasn't taking the food, that all gave me information that he was, you know, probably in a minute they're about to do something not so nice, because he was like, I don't, you know, and as I recall in those moments, he was being particular about what food he wanted, and if the preferred food item wasn't in the hand, like I ran out of good stuff, then I was more likely to, you know, would see an escalation in aggressive responses. Took a step towards you too at the first kick. He's very colored up, such as a turkey, high alert. Well, this one's a male, so they're more colorful than the females. And you can see he's sort of, you know, looking, you know, kind of looking to evaluate, does she have what I want, you know, my preferred stuff. And then of course as he starts to satiate, and then I brought my hand a little bit closer to his face too. I'm also like really, you know, and so that could have been, you know, creating the situation where he's more likely to be like, hey, back off. You know, so you're thinking about every little thing that you're doing that is more likely to be an antecedent for an aggressive response. You know, how close I am to him, how close I am into his space.
We definitely have to be fast with our reinforcers, right?
Kita mesti berikan
And right to his mouth so he doesn't
So there's a
get
lot
mad.
of, there's a lot of antecedent stuff there that I'm considering. And we did find with more repetition, we saw that
Mad if he doesn't.
there would be less aggressive responses. It could be that the food was coming from my hand. That could have been part of, initially why there was an aggressive response. I was trying to deliver food fast after he did the correct response. Sometimes how you bring a hand up to an animal can trigger undesired responses, so you have to be, aware of those things. Color up, like high blood flow to the skin, making more colored. So you're saying maybe his blood pressure is up, more agitated. Yeah.
I'm liking his body
Potentially.
language better. Yeah.
But again, we go back to, is that we go back to
We definitely have to be fast with our reinforcers, right?
cause or consequence, right? Could he also be, he looks at the target extension as your body, of the target as an extension of my body as a threat. Yeah, he did peck very hard at right there at the target initially.
Drop a bunch of them too.
So that's something that I look at, although he pecked it softer there as we got going.
He doesn't get the food.
So those are all things that I'm evaluating. But even how I bring up the target is important. I try to bring it up in a way that is, hopefully in a way that is less likely to trigger that more aggressive response, so that I have an opportunity to reinforce what I want, the kind of touching of the target that I want, so that I can reinforce that. Which got better, as we saw there.
I'm liking his body language better. Yeah.
But again, so again, going back to kind of the point of all this is I'm inferring a private event based on what I can observe, right? And all of this has to do with antecedent and consequences
And right
too,
to
right?
his mouth so he doesn't
So
get mad.
I wouldn't say that it is his internal state that caused the behavior. None of this would have happened if I didn't approach him, right? If I didn't approach him with a target and start trying to do stuff with him, he isn't out there just,
Very mad if he doesn't.
kicking into the air. He started kicking because I approached and tried to interact with him. And then that started to change based on different things that I was doing, right? And Alex is asking what his reinforcement history was with targeting, and this is the first time it was ever attempted. Now, he does have a reinforcement history with people in general, which is that he tends to view people as an aversive stimulus, which is why they wanted to start working with him. Asking to peck closer to the ground could be used for less kicking. Actually, I was concerned that doing anything closer to his feet could be more dangerous, which you might have noticed I was avoiding moving anywhere. Like if food dropped, I wouldn't go down there and pick it up because I was worried that he would be more likely to kick because I was going to be closer to the ground. So I was avoiding
Right to
that.
his mouth so he doesn't get mad.
Just didn't want to. I didn't want to encourage
He's getting pissed.
feet near people near the ground. But I see you're saying like putting the target near the ground. Yeah, I didn't want to be near his feet. But I get what you're saying. I didn't want to be around his feet. So anyway, but getting back to the point of the discussion, more about like how it's the antecedent and the consequences that are changing the responses, just like anything, and that we can tie that back into what we are, our interpretation of the private event. And so let's look at another one. We'll look at this Japanese macaque. There's not as much to observe, but I just want you to. I can turn the audio down, and we'll look at her. so there's a troop in here, and you can see we've got some hanging targets here. But what I really want you to look at is just her body language right now when I go to move this target. And she's a disabled individual because at one point she got attacked by other members of the troop. I don't remember the circumstances. So her inclination is to stay away from the rest of the group. And so I was trying to station train her to her own individual target away from the rest of the group, so that she had a place where she could go and be less likely to have to compete with the other members of the troop. And when this plays over again, what I really just want you to look at is her face when I go to move that green target. All right, there it is, right there. Or move that yellow one, I should say. But I think that face, to me, and again, you may need to know something about macaques or primate behavior, but it really said something to me. And it'll play again here in a minute. And again, you just, you might look at her face before and where she's looking, what she's doing. And there we already see a change right there. Yeah, and so Megan says she looks at you, mouth opens, pauses, and moves away. Yeah, so that mouth open behavior, that looking at me, those are a change in her, yeah, and then looks at yellow target. Yeah, that change, brows back. Yeah, so that that change in that facial expression, it has to do with that species, but it gives me information, right? That says she's not comfortable with that, and then she moves away, and usually we think of that as escape or avoidance behavior, right? So we use that information to maybe infer what might be going on in terms of a private event. So again, we don't assume that they don't have these private events, but we can't access them, so we look at the body language to help give us information and help us with what decisions we're going to make. And so you may have noticed that I'm really far away from the fence for a few reasons. One, because they can reach through, and also it makes her more comfortable. And I'm also tossing her food, right? I'm not trying to hand her food, and by tossing her food, I can still get the desired response that I want, which is to station near this target, and I can reinforce that action, but also make it more likely that this animal can give me the kind of body language that I want, which is relaxed and comfortable. All right, so we're going to talk about another thing, modal action patterns. Sorry, my dog is awful barky today. It is what do you call it? Garbage day, but he's making a different kind of bark. All right, so we do want to talk about this whole genetic component that matters. So with all these things, you may have heard the terms fixed action patterns or modal action patterns. Fixed action patterns, the animal needs to go through the whole response no matter what. But a modal action pattern, these are behaviors with an inherited component. So it's a predictable behavior that is emitted when specific stimuli are in the environment. So we often think of, so you'll hear people say that, oh, it's innate, or it's instinctual, but really, probably the better term is a modal action pattern. And so it's just that it's sort of It's just a natural behavior to the species. They're called modal because they're modular, meaning that they still can be influenced by selection, by consequences, and so there's that component of genetics, but there's also that component of operant condition. So we think of like nest building. We think of like, that chick that just hatched from the nest and it's, begging for food from its parents, but it might learn that if I beg, just doesn't beg nonstop. It begs when that parent maybe just came back from, a long flight where it was gathering up a bunch of food and it sees that mom's got a mouthful of worms, but it's not a good time to beg when there's not a mouthful of worms, so it's going to beg more intensely then. Maybe it's louder and more noisy then. So it kind of learns when's the best time to be more obnoxious versus another time. And so there's tons of behaviors that fall into these categories. But I think, to me, that's how I think of like, emotions in general. These are behaviors that are inherited, but they can be influenced by operant conditioning. So I'm going to share a video with you that I think is a nice example of a modal action pattern, because it's very specific to a species, but it can definitely be influenced by learning. An animal can become better at it or make it more elaborate and be more successful with it depending on learning. So I'll share this one with you. So I was for one of my classes, we were talking about emotional stuff, and is aggression display. Yeah. So that's a big male green iguana out in the wild. That was in Curacao when I was visiting a veterinary friend of mine, and the iguanas were everywhere. And so that's just a big male doing his display of his dewlap, and they may do it at other males, but they'll do it at people too. And so he's just, hey, I'm a bad boy, stay away from me. But he also may run if I get too close. But that they have variability in that, and that's one of the things about genetics and behavior, right? It's that variability that gets selected. So maybe a bigger, fancier display, because the color, they can change the color on that. They can bob their heads more. They can put the dewlap out more. And if that's more successful at driving another individual away, then maybe the male is going to, do a bigger head bob or put the dewlap out more or bob his head, slower or faster, because that's what works at getting the other individual to go away. So it can absolutely be influenced by consequences. But other lizards don't necessarily do head bobs, right? Other species, so there's an inherited component that has selected for that in certain species of lizards, but not all lizards do that, right? So there's that genetic component, and then that inherited or selected component by consequences. Trying to put this behavior on cue is ethical for his inner well-being. Oh, well, that's a really good question. I don't know anyone that's put that behavior on cue. That's a good question. So there are a lot of behaviors that are modal action patterns that we do put on cue. The question is it separated from the emotional state or not is the question. And sometimes I think that is possible. Because it's just about the topography of the behavior, and it becomes disconnected from quote we don't know for sure that it becomes disconnected from the emotional state, but I think that there are situations where people have done that. Like I would say a great example might be teaching parrots to vocalize on cue. Like I've done the situation where I have trained a parrot that can, parrots will scream to do like a contact call for another parrot when they are separated from the individual. And I will say in those situations there, you will find those parrots that are screaming to contact their other parrot. There will be body language that goes along with that when it's more about, I really want to find that other parrot. Like you might see more like pacing or looking for the other parrot. And so there might be body language that you might associate with that you might describe as anxious or, anxiety about, I don't want to be alone. But you can also teach a parrot to vocalize on cue, right? So that same topography, that same screaming behavior where they scream really, really loud, you could also train that screaming really loud behavior without that anxiousness so that you could demonstrate, whoa, parrots scream really, really loud. Do you want one as a pet? I don't know, maybe not. So you could also train that same behavior, but not have it with the anxious body language of I'm looking for the other bird type of thing. So I think there are situations where you can train what a behavior that has the same topography but is not maybe having the same function. So you have those situations, but you would have to evaluate it on a case-by-case basis, if that makes sense. Jordan says, I've got to go, but thank you for presenting. I don't think I've ever thought so deeply about thinking. And Annetta says, I believe it can be disconnected. Example, seals slapping on their belly, trained. We call it waving. It's a natural threat behavior, but it can be trained. Okay. Yeah, so I think you just have to get into the details. Yeah, and Soria says thanks. Yeah, so again, I think this kind of ties in with our whole discussion here about emotion. So I think it's a very good question that we have to look at all of the details to really evaluate what we are seeing to kind of get at, can we come to some sort of conclusion about this covert behavior that we can't really access, because we're only making a guess based on what we're seeing on the outside. And again, we can look at the conditions too. Under what conditions is this behavior occurring? Or are we seeing these overt behaviors? That also may help us make a guess at what's happening, on the inside the skin, as they say. So that's a really good question, Soria. Yeah, I think that's a great question. All right, guys. So let's kind of wrap it up here. Because, again, this is a really deep topic. There's a lot more to explore on it. So we're just kind of touching the surface. And again, for members, I've got more papers you can read on it. So thinking is a covert behavior. It's a complex operant behavior controlled by consequences. In humans, this is mostly a verbal behavior. If I do this, then this will happen. Our society promotes the idea that our thoughts and emotions cause our behavior. But again, this is the mentalistic approach to the world. So like if you're out there talking to, your friends and colleagues, or I would say mostly your friends. I would say animal trainers don't necessarily come from this world, or they usually shouldn't. But I would say everything you watch on TV, it's all mentalistic, and the general psychology world is mentalistic. However, if you accept that thoughts and emotions are behaviors that are simply covert behaviors, that respond to the same rules as overt behaviors, in other words, they are selected, you will find that they are just another behavior to manage by arranging antecedents and consequences. This is the radical behaviorist perspective. Covert behavior is a behavior that cannot be directly observed and measured, so thinking, feeling, dreaming. These are also called private events. And overt behavior, which can be directly observed and measured. This can include physical movements, changes in body language, muscle tension, eye shape, hair pileation, verbal behavior, so even vocalizations. It is erroneous to say that those who come from a behaviorist approach do not care what an animal is thinking or feeling. You often hear that when people say, talk about I can't say it. You know what I mean? That we don't care, but that's not true. I would say we care a lot. Most animal trainers really, really care that our animals are comfortable and relaxed, or if they're showing aggressive behavior or fear responses. However, it's the information that we use is that it's what we observe. It's not what's inaccessible, right? So how we measure that is a different challenge. They are not directly accessible. Therefore, we look at overt behavior to gather information. So we may conclude an animal is thinking about something when it looks at something or makes a deliberate movement with its body. We may conclude an animal is feeling fear or comfort or aggression based on movements, body postures, muscle tension, eye position, ear position, vocalizations, etc. And as animal trainers, we use our previous experience to predict what animals are thinking and feeling based on overt behaviors. And we can change conditions as needed to reach our desired behavior goals. If we take the approach that the thoughts or emotional states of the animal is driving the behavior, that mentalistic approach, we are left with little ability to impact the behavior. And finally, modal action patterns are behaviors that with an inherited component, a predictable behavior that is emitted when specific stimuli are in the environment, and but due to flexibility and adaptability of behavior, modal action patterns can change due to selection by consequences. They are influenced by both genetics, phylogeny, and operant conditioning, ontogeny. As animal trainers, we consider both of those when we are making decisions. All right. Megan says, I appreciate that thought process of caring. I struggle separating my assumed emotions in an animal and following only their current behavior. Yeah, and I think, I tend to think of animal trainers as like the most thoughtful, caring people. We're so concerned with making sure our animals are comfortable and relaxed. So in a weird way, we're like really into emotions and thinking, but the way that we think about it is just very different. We're just very consumed with the observable behavior is the way that I think about it. So I think, when people say that, we're just cold, it's like the opposite. That's the way that I think about it. We're exactly opposite to that. So anyway, like I said, it's a really deep topic. There's so much more to discuss on it. And, an hour is hardly time to do it justice, but maybe a few little tidbits there to get you thinking about it more. And like I said, for you guys that are members, I've got, I think, like 4 articles you can read on it. That's pretty cool. And what else do we got? We've got the podcast is out that I mentioned last week on effective reinforcement with Dr. Jesus Rosales-Ruiz and Mary Hunter. So if you haven't checked that out, there's the link, animaltrainingfundamentals.com. Just go to podcast there and you can check that one out. And inspired by Annetta Peterson, she was showing me this super cool endoscopic camera, and I had to get one for myself. So there's a new, it's a great podcast. Thanks, Megan. Yeah, it is. That was so much fun talking to them. There's a new review of endoscopic cameras in animaltrainingfundamentals.com with some video clips from Annetta and her team at Copenhagen Zoo. And I've got one on using it with my dog, who you heard barking away today. And then also for members, you should have gotten an email with a link to attend this conference if you want to hear more from Dr. Jesus Rosales-Ruiz and Dr. Joe Lang, and also Sean Will and Masa, and I don't know if I'm going to say her last name right, Nishimuta. They're doing, it's this week actually, a conference all about more about the constructional approach. And so if you are a member of animaltrainingfundamentals.com, you should have gotten a link to sign up for that. They actually offered free attendance to our members. So please take advantage of that. I'm attending because can't get enough of learning more about the constructional approach. So this is going to be awesome. So they told me there is new Jesus has new stuff that he's sharing about new steps or like new fine-tuning on the process. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I highly encourage that. And then tomorrow is a Tower Talk for members, 11, same time as today. So those of you who want to keep this conversation going and other topics as well, join us. All right. And if you're not a member, again, we're still doing the discount because I don't know about you guys, but Pandemic Land is still happening. It's not over yet. All right. So just go to animaltrainingfundamentals.com, enter that code sunglasses, and that'll give you the discount. Okay, there we go. A few more comments. And people said it was a great podcast. I know. I really had a great time talking with Mary and Dr. Jesus Rosales Ruiz. It was hard to stop talking. There's just so much. I learn a lot from them. They're, again, these behavior scientists are, really stretching my brain, man. I'm loving it. Podcast is really good. Great as someone being trained by my animals. Great chat from Alex. Really enjoyed listening. And Michelle says, thank you. Excellent. And awesome live. Thank you. Thanks so much. This is a great topic. Thanks for the discussion. I know I feel like we just barely scratched the surface because it's a deep topic. It really is. But I thought it would be good, like I said, just to mention the main points, that it's, that they're controlled by consequences. They're not the cause of behavior. And that really, the main things are, we are looking at the consequences and antecedents. That private behavior is controlled by the same things that our overt behavior is. And, that really can kind of open your mind. And again, I love the imagery of the chess game. If you think about, I'm thinking about a move and then I make it. My animal's thinking about a move and then they make it. It really, and that you're doing that together. Like if you think about a training session that way, that the two of you are playing a chess game and you're both kind of trying to figure out what each other is going to do, and that the consequence of your action is going to kind of help decide what, it's going to help predict what the other one's going to do. It's just, to me, it was such a cool metaphor. I love that. So thank you so much. I'm very new to all this, but I've been diving in head first. So I appreciate all of this. Heck, why not? And Annetta says, thank you for making our Mondays great. Great as always. It's fun to talk about, it just kind of twists your brain around in new directions to think about this stuff. And now when you're going to be walking around and interacting with, whether it's people or animals, you're just going to be like, that's interesting behavior. And what they're doing there, and it's hard to go back to your old ways of thinking about how the world works. So kind of fun. All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna let you go on. Thinking of behavior of predicting, lots to chew on. I know. And I really, my dog is just off the charts today. I'm gonna have to start thinking about his behavior. And then the whole thought about thinking about what thinking is really, like, that was really fun for me. And the idea that, again, like this, like I said, this is the thing that Skinner said. I don't know if people are still on board with this train of thought, but the idea that we encourage kids to talk, and then we said, oh, no, stop doing that out loud and just start putting your talking back into your skin, and that might be how it turned into us just thinking became what it was for humans, in terms of like people who are just having their thinking be streams of words. But I don't know, cool stuff. Anyway, all right, guys. Well, I'm gonna let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll get this posted in animaltrainingfundamentals.com, so you all can enjoy it there for members, and go back and review it and hop around and have some fun there. Go check out the new stuff in the program, and we'll look forward to chatting with you. Some of you tomorrow, so we'll dive deep again tomorrow. All right, then. Take care. Have a good day. Bye.